Hello, this is Pane Consulting ArcGIS Workshop. My name is Frank Conkling, and today we're going to explore a little bit the changes in ArcGIS Pro 3.5, and we're going to focus primarily on the parcel fabric, but we're also going to go and talk a little bit about something that was introduced in 3.5 that I find very, very useful. Hopefully everybody else does too. Again, just to remind everybody, if you look at the lower right corner, you'll see a QR code that'll take you to our website, tell us who we are, tell you who we are, what we do, why we do it, how we do it. A reminder that Panic Consulting is an ESRI business partner. We have been for over 27 years now, and we are the first in the nation to have received the parcel management specialty designation, noting that in fact we know all about the parcel fabric and we are experts in implementing it, and we'd love to help you with that. With that being said, let's go ahead and start. All right. So we only have four topics for today, but we're going to dig into them a little bit deeper. And quite candidly, I'm going to be a little bit honest about some of the topics and what they're doing and what works, what doesn't work, what needs to have more refinement on it. So the first thing we want to go about is the big one that they introduced for 3.5 for parcel mappers, and that's COGO Reader. We're going to talk about that, and eventually we're going to talk about displaying vertices and nodes, finding disconnected parcel points, and then the pane sets. So let's look at the COGO Reader. Again, the first thing we have to go and say is that the COGO Reader is only available if you have ArcGIS Pro and a parcel fabric on here. So it's only available if you have the parcel fabric as part of your data set. All right. With that, if you do not have the parcel fabric, it doesn't even show up on there. And I know there's a lot of us lobbying to try to make this part of the core. I think at least for a couple releases, this will remain parcel fabric only. But they are sensitive to it. So the Parcel Fabric Reader, the COGO Reader, actually what it does is it goes and allows you to read PDFs, TIFFs, common image formats like PNGs and JPEGs, and then it goes and performs OCR on it and extracts from there a meets and bounds description. It actually does a pretty good job on it, at least from what it's done. And it consists of three separate panes. When you're working with it, you have this first pane over on the left-hand side. This first pane actually goes and shows you the image that it's actually going through and doing the OCR on. The next pane is this pane in the middle here. This is an image showing you the words that it has extracted, what it has pulled out of the OCR of the image. And it actually highlights in bold and different colors what is pulled out of here. For example, you can see on here that in red it says commenced at. So it recognized those words. And then with that, it went and started putting together an actual connection lines for it. It also, you can see that there's certain words that trigger it. For example, thence will do it. And then you'll see, for example, the bearings will be in a blue, you'll see the distances in a purple, and as you scroll down, you'll see other things, and we'll go over some of those. And then while it's doing that, it's going and extracting components on here. And then it takes it to the third pane, and this third pane simulates the traverse tool, but it's not the traverse tool. And you want to recognize it's radically different from the traverse tool, because this is just pulling this information out, putting it into a grid on here. For example, this is a connection line. These are your standard parcel lines here. And once it's done with that, and you've gone and told it where this starting point of this traverse is, it will go and display it down in here. So you can see about where it is, whether or not. The thing you want to look at a lot when this is working is whether or not it has pulled everything out and whether it has come up with a closure. Closure will tell you whether or not it's caught everything or not caught everything. And so you want to be careful with that. And you want to look at it. And we'll go over how do you fix it and such. Once you've got it fixed, you then have a couple of options in here. You can set it. You can then go and tell it to add it. There's a place here, this when it's active, tell you to add it to the map and it'll actually put it into your map right there. There's also options, and you'll see that here. You have options to go and load it into your traverse grid. Now be careful with this. I recently did this once in that I said, oh, let me go and follow this. I went and I set my closure, my start point. I went and added to the map, and then I went and I clicked on the add to the traverse. By the way, there's two add to traverse, one for your connection lines and one for your traverse lines. And I connected these just to see what it was like. It put it over there. It put it over there twice. Once for this and once for here. So be aware of that. But overall, it's a nice tool. I'm beginning to use it more and more. But let's talk about those buts. All right, let's get in here and look at this. So this is a parcel fabric tool. If we actually go and look at the toolbox here, let's make sure I'm editing. I am editing. The COGO Reader is here. When you go and start the COGO Reader, the first thing it will do is it'll open up these three panes on here. I can share with you what I have found is this pane is less important than the middle pane, which is where you're going to do any modifications if you have an issue. And then this is sort of the results pane, and you want to make sure that this is as wide as you can make it so that you'll see the insert to traverse tools, because this pane itself is not necessarily expandable. So it still hasn't gotten to that point where it's very flexible, where if you make that pane smaller, it automatically moves everything around. So you want to be careful with this and make sure, and I'll show you. So if I go in here and say, let's start with a PDF, and we'll bring that PDF up and it will read it and process it. Again, it's now processing it, and note I have here my closure. And what it did is it actually said, okay, on here, you have a couple of different things in here. You have, and you can see all of the information that comes in. It has commence at. Once it recognized that commence at, it suddenly then went and started with a connection line. But when I'm looking through this, I'm looking at it and I'm seeing, oh, wait a minute. This right here should be highlighted. So it's missing something from the point of commencement to the point of beginning. So this area should be highlighted, and this is where it gets a little tricky. If I go in here and look at this here, it should go and highlight over here. I'll go and highlight this, and I'll see it over here. I can then go and look at my actual image here, and here's the actual information that it pulls in and identifies. All right. And when I'm here, I can look at this, but when I look at the actual extraction here, turns out that there's a little point there that it's pulling out of here. I don't see it here, but somewhere on the OCR, it might be that point right there. It identified a point, and I can go into this second pane and I can actually edit this. And when I make changes to this and edit it, I can then tell it, reread or recalculate this with this edit that I just changed. And you note, now that I did that, it now has that information, and it has that over here on my point of commencement. All right, so here's my connection lines. It just added this leg in here, and it's gone. And note it's actually showing me where this thing is. All right, so the couple tools in here, yes, this is a very important tool, but it's important to also make sure that if you're looking through here, that if you don't get a good closure here, you check to see what could this thing have missed. And it's still, again, this is release one. Great implementation for release one. There's things that can and should get fixed on here, though, including things like making sure that those words that it's looking for, and it's looking for things like north, degrees, west, east, south, point of beginning, curve. There's curve information that it's looking for. It's looking for certain sequences of words on here and using those words to go and extract that out. It's not true AI yet. There's still a lot of work to be done here, but it's a pretty good start. The other thing that you might look at is that right now it's actually pretty good at pulling out this degree sign, but if it turned out that it missed a degree sign here, for example, there's actually a signal here where you can say enter a degree sign and it'll go and put a degree sign in there, and I can tell it to go ahead and rerun this and automatically go and rerun it, extract the data out of this again. It recognizes degree signs, it recognizes the words degrees. And I've got a couple different legal descriptions here that we'll go and work through. It's a great tool. I'm using it more and more, but I also find that there's some issues as far as some of the cleanliness of the images that I'm getting off of the county clerk site. By the way, just to remind everybody, if you have a question or a comment, go ahead and put it over in the chat window. Mickey with Panda is going to be watching that, and she's going to go and interrupt me if you find anything. So once we've gone and found that, we then have to go and tell where this is supposed to be. All right. So we click on the set, start, and this is where it's still a little bit clunky because as soon as I change my windows, I have to go and set start again because I have to have this window active to do this. When I click on add to the window, it will go and show what it's going to look like moved over to that window. And I can actually go and say add to map. Now, if you look, it tells me there's no active record right now. So if I go and add this to my map, it will not be related to a record. And I then will have to go and select those individually to make sure that I collect them all. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you from me using this a while, the first thing you want to do when you're going to go and use this, start a record, create a record. Just make sure that you've got this. Now, once I go in here and I can say, now add this to my map, it will go and add it to my map. And when I move this back, there it is added to my map. Again, the reason why I strongly suggest you do that is if it turns out, as I did here, that I was not in the correct location when I started it, I can go in here and I can say, oh, select everything as part of my record, and it will select everything, and I can then go and move that. If not, I would have to go and select that individually, and then do a move to get it over into the correct place. All right. Fairly simple. I still haven't figured out optimally how to configure this full size pane that it works in with everything else. I tend to use a smaller screen, especially when I'm giving presentations like this. If I have a couple screens, I can move this over to a different screen, and that might help. But I tend to work on just one screen when I'm showing people and demonstrating things. When I'm done, I can cancel this out. Be aware when you cancel it, it goes away, clears out from the memory on here. All right, so let's cancel that out. I could then go in here and finish this and say, okay, go ahead and create my seeds, go ahead and build my active record, and it'll go and build my record, and then I could go and put it in place how it should have been. It's the way it's supposed to work. All right, I'm going to go and cancel all those edits, move those out of here, and just demonstrate this again with another option in here. Let's go back to this one. And all right, so we have the next option here. Let's go, let me go and see which is bookmarks. Um, let's manage our bookmarks here. This is the 042. All right, let's create a new record. And COGO Reader 1. And this is a new tax parcel. All right. Now we go and implement this. Now, the one thing I found is that if in fact you're planning on going, or you think you might be putting this into the Traverse, it's almost better to not use the modify pane to implement this, because then you'll wind up flipping back and forth between these panes. And it's almost better to go and use this pull down here or make it a favorite. And if you're going to be using this a lot, I strongly recommend that's how you proceed on here. Let me go move these things around. All right, and I think this was I forget which one it was. All right, well, let's see here. Again, this is where it's loading it. This is where it's processing it. And this is where it's showing us what is, again, the connection line. This is let me go in and make this a little bit bigger so we can see we do have all these here and we have our closure here. This looked like it worked very well. Over on this pane, you actually have the ability to zoom in and zoom out on here and move this around, make it fit inside of here. So there's a little bit of things that you can do for there. And here, this is pretty limited, other than the ability to add your degree sign and go and make your edits in here. And again, here's the commence, where it found the commence. Here's where it started. The thence is one of the keywords. Here's my notice. It's finding degrees here. It's finding the feet. Thence run here, a distance of here. It's run here. And again, it looks like it cleaned it pretty well. This is a fairly small Traverse, meets and bounds description, but it found everything for me. And I can go ahead and say, all right, let's go ahead and add this. Now, again, this is where I'm trying to figure out, how do I set this interface up? Because if I tell it I want to set this, I then have to move my screen out of here to go and tell it where this is going to be set. And I think this one is here, on here. So I tell it to go and find that there. And then I can say, add this to the map. And it will add it to the map. Yep. And that's this parcel right here. Just to illustrate, to make sure, let's go and select all the records in here. Here's my point of commencement all the way down and the different points in here. And you'll note there's one here, there's one here, and then it goes over to here to my point of beginning. And then it goes around on my point of beginning and goes and shows all of that on here. So if you know where your point of commencement is, or your point of beginning in here, really nice, and it saves some times. I can create seeds, and then I can go ahead and tell it to build this. Once I've got it built, I can go ahead and do align parcels. Let's go in and make it 10 feet, and then tell it go ahead and generate these so we can see this is going in, adjusting this new parcel to the existing, and tell it to go ahead and align it. And it's now already aligned up. And I can go ahead and clip this from here and tell it to go ahead and clip everything underneath here. I only have my parcel layers on, which is fine. I can then see that it's clipped that parcel out. There's the new parcel, and I can see that it marked historic in here. So again, if you've got a very clean PDF or a very clean PNG or JPEG or TIFF, and you've got from the clerk's office, it's a really clean image on here. This works really, really nice. Um, let's try one more just in case. So let's go and start another record on here. And this is another parcel. All right. I've got a bookmark, COGO Reader 2, this one here. And let's go ahead and start. So this is where I was saying, maybe instead of starting it over here, which is how I usually do it, sometimes maybe I'll pull this down so I see all of my tools and click on COGO Reader there. Then open it up and go over here. And I think this might be the next one that I'm looking at. And processing it, and I look and I've got, this is where I've got a misclosure of 1,248. So I'm definitely missing some courses in here. So once I've got that misclosure, I'll automatically going back over here and looking, okay, what have we got on here? So I'll start looking and seeing where there might be a call that's missing. This is my point of commencement. I've got a single call here. It doesn't look like that's a problem. I go to my point of beginning. Oh, this first one here. There's a bearing here that's not coming out correctly. So it's like, all right, do I have a, let's see if I have anything there. Nope. Is it this that's causing it? Also, one of the things I want to look for is whether or not I have any sort of distance, or excuse me, any sort of misspelling in here, any sort of a calls in between that might confuse this. And in this case, I have a call where it might be looking at where's the west in here. Okay, the west along this, the western boundary of said property here. So let's go and see if we can, if that was enough to correct it. It looks like now it has that in here. And it identified that, okay, there's the rest of that. What did I delete? I'm not sure. But there was something in there that caused it to not work correctly. Going down to the east boundary of here. And one of the things I find I'm just doing is going in here, and if there's a line, for example, in here, if there's a line, I'll just go and start cleaning those out. Here's an interesting one. I can tell you already. This is then south 15 degrees, 15 minutes, 42 seconds, and it did not recognize the E in east, and instead it makes it H. So there's a correction that I might do and tell it to rerun this and see if that's sufficient. And then it identified this here. So I now have seen that along here. I'm still going further along to the property. Then it's run south 17 degrees here. And then I see there's something at the end of here. West, there's another little component in here. A distance of here. And try this here. See if that recognizes it here a little bit more. It did recognize this bearing. It did recognize here. It, again, one of the issues you're going to have is even though this might look pretty clean, you want to recognize that when it's performing the OCR on here, it picks up any little discrepancy that might be in there. So you want to get it clean. You can see these little artifacts in here from the scanning. You You want to see if you get something as clean as possible because you can't always see what it's going to pick up on here. Any questions on this? Anything that you might want me to go and talk about or to demonstrate a little bit more? Curves, it still has a couple little issues with curves in here. I don't think this one actually has a curve in it. But you can see just this north, there's a little residual at the end of that north on here. And if I go and do this, it's getting closer. It still has some problems with it. All right. I find I'm using it more and more. It's a really, really useful tool. Um, I have a question here saying, how does COGO Reader handle older documents? And I think there's two elements you need to look at as far as older documents. One is how clean is that scan? And it's going to have to be a scan or an image of some sort. And if you see all sorts of little sort of scatter on it, it's going to have an issue with it, obviously. And then secondly, cursive writing. It does not handle cursive at all. So it's, again, this is release one. I suspect eventually there might be better options on here, but at the moment, it's a great tool, but recognize it probably needs to be improved before you use it every single time you have a meets and bounds description. Yeah, cursive it's still not there. But again, I find I'm trying to implement this as much as possible because it is really, really handy for it. All right. Um, Question, can you change it from quadrant bearing to, I think at the moment, it recognizes what's in there. I don't have any azimuth bearings in here. So I would check it out. I believe I heard Amir say that right now it is focused on quadrant bearings, but I suspect it's just a matter of them going and looking and identifying or changing the words that it finds. And I think that's one of the things you're going to find is that there's certain groupings of words that it's looking for. It's looking for certain cardinal words. It's looking for certain groups of words. And what tends to cause the biggest problem is curves. How how that legal description is written, whether or not it describes this as being a curve to the right or left, or whether it just says it's a curve concave to one way or the other. And it has still issues still when identifying that. What even if it has, again, it's I haven't fully figured out what's tripping it up completely, but I think there's a great effort for the first effort. We need some more refinement, and I'm sure we're going to see this more and more. I know they're getting a lot of, Esri's getting a lot of responses on this, and it's going to be a great tool. It's a great tool now. Um, the other questions are, well, what about non-meets and bounds parcels? It doesn't do them. It doesn't do any sort of aliquot description or any sort of divides, but you've got great tools here in the parcel fabric with your divide tools and your split tools and everything else. So this is primarily just meets and bounds, bringing that in. It's a supplement for the traverse tool to get it into that traverse tool so that you can refine it and make sure it's everything you need. Okay. Um, Again, it's a really nice beginning point. I like it. I'm trying to implement it more and more. It is release one, but the great effort on here. They've done some good thing in here. The next the next change with 3.5 I want to talk about is one that um, those of you who've been following our workshops know that one of the tricks we'll do, especially when we're evaluating data, is we'll look to see where there are densified curves, look to see where we've got a straight line or a curved line, and look at where all the vertices are. Well, it turns out that in 3.5, there is a new way of automatically displaying that. So let's go and look at it. And that's actually down on the bottom of the display area. If you look over here, there is this new vertices and nodes, and this is like like your snapping and like your grid, your constraints, and your inference. By the way, if you're not using inference, you should be using inference a lot. Your grounded grid. There's also now this vertices and nodes. And what this does is when you go and click on this to turn it on, it automatically begins to display in symbology components on here. And let's click on here again and look at the settings, and we can get in here. By the way, these settings are set in the editor settings grouping. So if you go to your editor, pull that group down, you can have the settings, it's there. And this will actually go in and you can set what actual layers are going to be displayed with these, whether it's all visible ones, whether it's just editable ones or just snappable ones on here, and whether or not how it's going to display nodes, whether it's points, midpoints, multi-points, and polygons. Go ahead and do that. You can also scale these back and forth. They've done a lot of work on this. How are you going to display vertices? And if I look over here, this is a vertex on my display. I can actually click on here and change that symbology on here for me as I go through. So I can click on here and tell it I want to go and change it from black to maybe purple. All right. And maybe you want to make it bigger on here. And when I click apply over here, you'll note it went and changed on there. So I can set how these things are set, what actually gets set, if it's an isolated point that's not connected to anything. And I know the next thing we talk about is see disconnected points on here. This will show us an isolated point. Be aware, this is only showing us disconnected points as far as displayable. Now, if I go and let's turn this off and let's turn on historic, because I suspect that we have some historic lines in there. When I do that, they're no longer disconnected points. Those are vertices instead. So it works against what's being displayed at the moment on here. So you get isolated points, you get pseudo nodes, you get straight lines, you get curved lines on here. So you can see the difference between a straight line and a curve. And again, you can do vertices so you can see densified curves on here. I really like what's doing on here. And the nice thing is you can have it display real quickly. Let's go over here and here's some curves on here just so that you quickly see it. And then you click back here and turn it off and it's off again. So you don't have to have it turned on all the time, which is what we were doing when we were having marker symbols put on top of the vertices for it. So this is a really nice tool. I think I'm going to start using it more and more. And this is not Parcel Fabric specific. This is for any feature classes that you have inside of ArcGIS Pro. So I like this tool a lot. And again, if you are not someone who's doing a lot of detective work and seeing, well, what is the condition of my data really? It may not be as important to you, but in fact, it is. If you're looking at data, looking to see why do I have problems here, those sorts of things, it is very important tools on here. Any comments or anything else on that? All right. Again, that's Core ArcGIS Pro. Nice tool on here. This next one, find disconnected parcel points. This is a geoprocessing tool, and it will identify points that are not connected to features, being lines or polygons. All right. And it's a geoprocessing tool, and you go, when you run it, you identify what feature class you want to go against. And then it will output a feature class with a symbology on it. Right now, it's just a default symbology. We're hoping to get some changes so you can identify different types of disconnected points. You can tell it to ignore fixed points. And again, remember, a fixed point is a control point. The odds are you don't want to go and say that a control point is disconnected. Yeah, maybe that you've got nothing connected to it. And same way, you've got fixed points, you've got constraint points, points that you set to not move. So you can do it to do both of those. Consider points along parcel edges as disconnected. If in fact you've got what used to be called a line point, you can tell it to consider that being disconnected, and you can then identify that. This is not fixing it. This is just identifying it. Here's the problem I have with this tool right now is that if in fact you run it against a feature class on which you have Z values for your points or any of your features, it will give you an error. It says that no, your geometry cannot have Z values on it. And that's a problem when in fact you're building, as we're doing with some of our clients, you're building 3D condos. You're in which you're putting elevations on these points, on these lines, on these polygons in here. So you just want to recognize that while it works, yeah, there's some limitations on what it does, and it will give you a separate feature class that you can then go and start analyzing and saying, is this a point that I can delete, or is this a point that's part of historic? And here, and again, just to remind everybody, let me go back here. We had some points over here. Let's go back here. Oftentimes inside of here, you'll find things like this, where you'll have points here, and even a point here. These points, they appear to be out there and be not connected to anything. But it turns out because of the parcel fabric, anytime there's a line in a parcel fabric, there will be a point on the end of that line. So again, if we have all sorts of different elements on here, and whether they're historic or not historic, you will find that you might have all these points out there. Now I can go and click on this and say, well, what is that point on here? And look at this attribute and say, okay, I have a point here. That point doesn't seem to be, it has a record associated with it on here. It was created by a record, but I don't necessarily see what that point is on here. I can go and tell it to go and activate the record of that point, and then I can go in and zoom to that record and see what was built on here. And there, it looks like it was one of those, but there's an issue with that. So this tool is attempting to have us identify those points that are abandoned out there, they're orphaned out there, and not actually attached to a feature. Now remember, inside the parcel fabric, let's go to points in here. If I go to my attribute rules inside the parcel fabric, there is a rule, a validation rule that says, well, actually where it is here, a validation rule. Oh, no, you're not going to see it on here. I'll see it here. My validation rule says that every feature must be connected to a record, must be related to a record in some way. Turns out that this is an older parcel fabric that didn't have that rule against the points, but it should be connected to the points. It should be connected to the records correctly. All right. Again, nice tool, but just be aware of that limitation that right now, I'd like for them to go and modify this and say ignore Z values so you can still have these and not have the issue with the strata points. Other than that, nice tool. I think I will use it quite a bit in the future. And that's 3.5. That's only parcel fabric, not anything else. So here, I'm going to finish up sort of with this is a nice one of those things that they also added in here. I'm not quite sure if anybody's aware of what they've got. One of the things with ArcGIS Pro in the interface is that you'll often wind up, because it uses panes, and these panes will accumulate as you're going and entering new things. For example, I have down here, this is my catalog pane, this is my bookmarks pane, this is my attributes pane, this is my modify, this is my symbology, my create, And if I do things like, for example, if I go in here and say, well, let's go ahead and configure the pop-ups, that's another pane on here. And if I look at my label properties, that's another pane up here. So it winds up with all of these panes in here, and you wind up with this type of a collection on here. But there's actually ways to go and set this so that it's not that bad. For example, if you go over to the View tab, on the View tab, there is pane sets. And they've got a couple presets coming automatically. So for example, if all you do is editing, you can get the editing preset, pane set, and it only has those panes that Esri believes you use for editing. This is standard editing, not parcel fabric editing. And it has your catalog view, your attributes, modify and create. Standard. If I go over to my view set and I look at my panes, if I've got geoprocessing, it'll have catalog and geoprocessing. If I'm doing mapping, it'll have just the mapping panes in here. However, and this is new in 3.5, they also allow you to create your own custom panes. So if I have a set of tools and a set of panes that I want to use all the time, for example, I've created one for parcel fabric. So if I go in here, it has my catalog, has my attributes, my modify, my create, and my manage records on here. So these are the parcel fabric tools that I use all the time. This is the pane that I use all the time for parcel fabrics. And that's simply as easy as, let's go and create a couple more things on here. Let's go in and put configure pop-ups in here. And let's go and do our labels in here also. So we have a couple panes in here. If I wish to create a new pane, I just pull that down, go to new pane, and let's just call this a demo set. I can go and create that demo set. Now, when I'm here, I can go back here and set it back, maybe to my parcel fabric on here. And then maybe I can go back to maybe my demo set in here. The thing I haven't checked yet is, well, if I move these around and I go and say, edit these, edit the demo set, and update it according to that, is that now the sort order? Let's go back to editing. Let's go back to parcel fabric. Let's go back to demo set. It looks like it is setting it according to the demo, the order in which I set it when I was either creating it or when I edit it. I like this. This is really a nice tool that I think more and more of us should be using if we're flipping back and forth. For example, you might have one for sharing or for all sorts of elements in here. All right. Any questions or comments on that? That is it. In fact, let's go back here to editing on here. All right. Any other questions on here? I know this is fairly short, a little bit shorter than our normal one is, but I wanted to focus on just these 4 components on here. There's a lot of new things inside of 3.5, but these are the ones for parcel mappers, especially parcel fabric mappers, that I wanted to say, this is a lot of value in here. If you can use them, definitely use them. Try them out, especially COGO Reader. I know it's going to continue to get better and better. And let's move on. So thank you for attending, and hopefully you come for the next one.